Whenever I look at my workbench, I think, man, I really wish I had more space, but I don't want to sacrifice a bigger footprint. Well, it's actually really simple. I'm just going to have this piece of plywood on a hinge so it can extend out with some legs, then it can tuck back in. So this workbench has a lot of sentimental value to me. It's got a lot of character in it, so I want to do a few modifications to this first, including pulling off that little door over there. So we'll get stuck into that now. I don't know why I made it like this, but I must have clearly lost a lot of things through this gap here. So we're going to have to fill this up because I feel like there's a lot of drill bits hanging around there. What I'm going to do first, just to make things a lot easier for myself, is I'm going to flip this workbench upside down and change the wheels. I made two of the wheels fixed on one side, so it's pretty awkward to move around right now, so this is really going to help if I can just have wheels that spin around all the way on all four. And I can tell you, it feels a lot better to have wheels that spin all the way around. Next up, I need to give this a really good sand because I've got heaps of just glue and debris stuck on this thing. It's been quite a while since I've cleaned it up. I do it once every few months depending on how bad it gets, but it's always going to be good to have a really nice, clean, level surface. Before I go on, you might be wondering why I have my workbench like this with such a deep grip. That's because I was really into the Craig jig at the time, so I needed something with a decent reach to go over my workbench. So this is sort of what I was using at the time, so that's why I made it so it can go in so deep. Alright, so what I'm doing here is adding this piece of wood just to give these hinges a little bit more support and a little bit of meat to drive the screw into it. So I'm putting one of these strips of wood under my workbench and another piece under the new piece of plywood that we're going to be using for the extension wing. So I've always hated putting hinges on, but there's really no easy way around it. Sometimes they don't go on straight, but seeing as this doesn't have to be super precise, I'm just clamping it on, driving the screw in. I think 3 hinges for this would be fine. And right here, it'd really help if I had a second set of hands. So I sort of had to put one screw in, walk around to the other side, put the other screw in, use my head as a bit of support just so I can drive the rest of those screws in from the bottom. So off camera, I made the first leg. This one seemed to work pretty well, just a simple hinge, and when it folds underneath, it sort of closes itself. So what I'm doing here is just adding this hinge to another piece of structural pine. This is what most people would call a 2x4. And it's not quite wide enough, but I feel like 2 screws is enough. This isn't going to be supporting a massive amount of load, so 2 screws is really fine. I had this 2-part resin kit laying in my shop for a long time. I was going to use it for a friend's bar that I made. We ended up using something completely different. So I want to cover my workbench in this. It'll cover up all the little grooves. I definitely should have been wearing gloves. I could have done this a lot different. Didn't really come out as expected, but hey, I just had the stuff sitting there. I wasn't really going to use it for anything else. I'm not much of a crafts sort of guy, so this is what I just ended up using it on. I cover this in a little bit more detail to my Patreon supporters. So that video is over on my Patreon page now. And I just give it a little bit of a clean up and discuss it a little bit more in detail. So if you want to check out my Patreon page, it's in the description, no pressure. If you want to support me that way, that's great. If not, watching my videos and giving me that positive feedback's more than enough. After giving it 24 hours to cure, I pulled off the tape. I needed that there to give it sort of like a reservoir, because a lot of those grooves that I cut into my workbench, they would have just fallen off. I also had a lot of screw holes in there, so plenty of drips I was trying to patch, but that's what it looks like for the most part. And with a bit of overhang, we're going to have to clean it up. So I've got this card scraper kit that I bought, so just give it a quick few licks with the card scraper, and that cleaned up the edges really nicely. So I've essentially just doubled my working space without increasing my footprint at all. So I highly recommend anyone with a workbench to do this. It's only a couple of hinges and a bit of plywood. Came out really well. I'm all for saving space, as you know, so I really enjoyed making this one, and again, it was so simple. So thanks very much for watching, guys. If you do want to check out my Patreon, it is in the description. Once again, no pressure. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.